Zach, I was researching a news story, and I found out that the Bayside School District owns the Max.
You're kidding.
No. And if Max doesn't come up with $10,000 in back rent by next week, our favorite hangout will be turned into a parking lot.
Well, we can't let this happen. Well, what can we do?
I think it's time we use the power of the airwaves. Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you think we're doing the right thing?
Hey, is Belding balding?
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I'm going to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, this week we are contemplating the third space. What is it to have the coolest hangout?
Could not have said it better myself. Yeah, we're talking about the hangouts that people inhabit in sitcoms, right? It's almost a one-to-one for every sitcom. There's at least one hangout space, sometimes multiple, be it a diner or a bar or a porch or a
basement.
Fence.
Yeah. Oh, a fence. Oh, king of the hill. I hear you.
Sitcoms are sort of by their nature, right? They're by definition, they're situation comedies. They're people hanging out and talking to each other.
And with the death of the third space in popular culture, it is so fun to go back, I think, and watch all these shows and just see people hanging out in places other than work and home.
Yeah, although in some cases they are work and home, at least for me.
Well, I guess for Jay, he's going to talk about some of those places.
Yeah, we should say we initially conceived this as sort of a simple countdown, kind of like our favorite TV theme songs, and we decided to sort of make it more of like almost like a tournament. And we're going to have different buckets, different sort of categories.
Yes.
What are our sort of overall buckets that we're dealing with?
All right. So our categories are bars and clubs, diners and cafes, homes, and other.
Right. We say homes, we mean, I made a point of including that because I wanted to make sure we covered like privately owned spaces, you know, things like somebody's pool or garage or something.
Right.
And then, of course, that final category is everything, be it, you know, something to do with work or just some random place or basically anything that's not essentially a eatery or a bar, you know, because so many of these places are.
Exactly.
But yeah, when we were originally doing it in a sort of simple top 5 thing, I wanted to make a point of not having our sitcom study hangouts thing just be the same as every article on the internet that talks about the same 5 or 6 places that we'll probably get to. So yeah, I tried to kind of think outside the box a little bit. And yeah, we've got no criteria here other than the places we would want to hang out and just the ones that we feel like talking about. You know, there's no
100.
Objective, you know.
No, and I think one of the hardest things for me in deciding like what ones are my true tops was really just like, is this a place I want to hang out, or is this place cool because I like the people that are hanging out there?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a constant conversation as we are nominating. So should we start with bars and clubs?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So this, for me, like, Jay doesn't hang out at bars and clubs. He doesn't like them. He doesn't want to hang out at them. So I think that my nominees get to win hands down because I would actually hang out at these places.
Well, I will sort of second that. I will say that, again, when we initially conceived this as a simple top 5, for that reason, I did not have any bars on my list. And I would have addressed that by saying that, yeah, I am by no means a moralistic teetotaler type of guy, but my relationship with alcohol currently is such that I don't want to hang out at bars, and it's not...
And your relationship with noise.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that we can get into maybe with some of these specifics. I discovered when I, went off to college and started hanging out in bars and places like that, TV sold me a false bill of goods, because on TV, you can go to a bar and talk to your friends and hear them. And there is this innocuous music playing so low in the background as to suggest the concept of music, but not get in the way of the audience understanding anything.
Right.
And so when I first started going out to bars, I was like, this is nothing like the places on TV. This is way too loud and crowded. This has none of that charm. But
you wanted a pub.
Yeah, but frankly, even the pubs are too loud. But yeah, so I feel like, we can take turns sort of announcing for each one of these. We've got a handful of nominees. You know, we could say, some might be as few as 2, maybe 4 or 5 and others. And yeah, we can kind of take turns and sort of say our piece and just kind of go from there.
And then I think we'll fight to the death for the ultimate winner.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
so
the plan.
Go ahead.
All
What's
right.
your first bar?
So, okay. I have a list here. I have 5 that bars, pubs that I think would be fun to hang out in. So I'm having a hard time deciding which one of these is my top. So hopefully through this conversation, you can help me.
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to start with the most kind of like ones. Cheers.
Yeah.
Obviously. Cheers from Cheers and McLaren's Pub from How I Met Your Mother. So I think McLaren's would actually beat out Cheers for me. But again, it might be because of like the people hanging out there. Like I think the people watching at McLaren's would be more fun than the people watching at Cheers.
That's a pretty wild statement. I don't know. Nothing against the denizens of McLaren's, but I mean, Cheers is famous for having this unforgettable cast of characters. We've talked about how the tapestry is so rich with that, I mean, you're not even, going way past Norm and Cliff and all of them. Like the third guy from the left is still like some funny character,
Right. And all the people that are just sitting in the background are so like normy. They're so boring. Whereas all the people sitting in the background of McLaren's, we've talked about this, are like
weird.
Super hot.
Yeah.
Or very funky. Like
Yeah.
there's some sort of like they're super hot or they're super weird, but there's not a lot of in between. And so for that reason, I think that McLaren's might beat out Cheers. But then hold on, there's more. Because you've got the Griffin from New Girl.
Okay.
So McLaren's and Cheers are going to be those kind of bars that are more like pubs that aren't so loud that you can't talk to people. Those are like the brown bars that you would like to go to, right? The music is relatively low. You can still have conversation. You can have a good time. It's a chatty bar, not a dancey bar, right? When you get to the Griffin, that's going to be one of those bars where the music is cranked and you have to yell over it to talk to your friends. But I still think that would be more fun to hang out at for a night out than maybe Cheers or McLaren's.
Yeah. Okay. See, I thought we were going to go more like one by one. So let me respond to some of the...
You got to catch up.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, to me, there's sort of no contest. And this was one of the things that, Cheers wouldn't have been on my list for my own personal reasons, but I sort of have to acknowledge that it is, the Michelangelo's David of TV hangouts, for so many reasons.
It's amazing. They're saying that it wins no matter what.
But there's the difference of its objective place and significance in culture versus my personal
where you would want to hang
affection
out.
for it. And my affection for it is strong. I mean, look, every time we talk about Cheers, we talk about how James Burrows and the Charles brothers have this amazing mark of quality on all of their shows.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is the living set, that you're always seeing not just some flimsy thing in the background. It's a built out set that feels real, and it's inhabited by all these real people.
Yes.
And so you're always seeing this literal depth where you're seeing the set go on and on in the background, and all of these real people inhabit it. And that's part of what makes it so good. And so, yeah, you've got that, I guess, in a lot of these. Technically, McLaren's does have that too. But to me, the way that Cheers does it, that it's not just... I feel like in McLaren's, in most of these shows, it's your main characters sitting at a booth or sitting at the bar and a bunch of extras in the background.
Right.
And Cheers just pulls off that magical thing of making the whole space feel alive. And part of it is that it's about the bar.
The
and
bar,
it's called
exactly.
Cheers,
It's a
so
workplace
everybody.
comedy. So that's the one. That's why there's so much more going on. Which is why, though, I think the Griffin ends up taking a jump for me, right? Because it could be argued that the main hangout in New Girl is the loft where they live.
Yeah.
Right? But when they do go somewhere else, they go to the bar where Nick works, and then eventually Cece works, and then eventually Nick and Schmidt own.
Yeah.
So in terms of being like a hangout for the characters in the show, that to me is why the Griffin takes that like next step up above Cheers and McLaren's. Now, to say a word on McLaren's behalf, for it not being a workplace, comedy where like the bar itself is not the setting of the entire show.
Yeah.
It truly becomes sort of like, even way more so than New Girl, right? Like it can be argued that the Hangouts are Ted's apartment, which is also Marshall and Lily's apartment, right? And McLaren's pub. Like those are the two places where the gang hangs all the time. McLaren's, because it is a hangout, because it's downstairs from the apartment, its proximity to home, all of that goes in its favor. And that the people in the background don't have to be as much of a living environment because it's not a workplace comedy, but they become a living environment because Barney's always hitting on someone, bartender Wendy, and then the other bartender, the guy whose name I can never remember, become like regulars on the show.
Sure.
So I feel like it really is, it's woven. McLaren's is like woven into the fabric of How I Met Your Mother.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's a huge part of it. I would say in both of those cases, the New Girl bar and the one in How I Met Your Mother, they would both be absolutely fine places to hang out at. And if we're really taking that as the criteria, then yeah, like I would really not have any issues other than I personally don't really drink much anymore.
Sure.
I think for me, they're not iconic or interesting locations in the way that some of these other ones are. Like the New Girl bar is nice, but there's something about, because that is this modern single camera show that is exceptional. We love New Girl. But if you said like, well, tell me all about the bar in New Girl, I'd be like, well, it's
there's
a bar.
A booth and there's the bar.
Like it's kind of a nice bar.
There's a jukebox and sometimes there's a piano.
Yeah. And with How I Met Your Mother, I feel like that show is really good because, just like you're saying, the specifics of the characters. I feel like How I Met Your Mother is really not trying to reinvent the wheel in any way with its concept and its sort of fundamental notions. And so it's almost just skating by on like, yeah, they hang out in a bar down the street, or downstairs. And so there's nothing bad about it, but it's like, its bread and butter is going to be the unforgettable idiosyncrasies of Barney and Robin and all of that. And so again, I'd say like, oh, of course, because it was so huge because that was one of the big shows of its time and that's such a big part of it. Absolutely. But again, there's just nothing that special about it.
You haven't said one of your bars or clubs yet.
Sure. Well, so My list also included Cheers, and that, sort of would probably be ultimately my favorite for the reasons we said. A couple others I had were Moe's Tavern, right, from The Simpsons. I feel like that's another one that it's on every freaking list or, blog on the internet.
So would you really actually want to hang out there?
Well, here's the thing. What I like about Moe's Tavern is that it captures, at least I think the initial point of it to me was that it captures the idea of a bar from the point of view of a child, because of those prank phone calls that were the recurring bit.
Yeah,
and even the rest of it where it is Homer off by himself, it just fully embraces the dank, depressing reality of when you're 10, you probably don't think of a bar as a cool place. If you're aware of a bar at all, it's that dark place that my dad goes to hang out to get away from us all with those weird drunk grown-ups that don't like us,
That's such a sad take on a bar.
But that's what Moe's Tavern is.
I know. That's why I didn't include it on my list, because I would never want to hang out at that bar.
No, again, so that's sort of the opposite of the McLarens and the Griffins, where it's right. That would not be in real life a pleasant place to hang out, but it is iconic for those reasons.
Sure.
It is special.
And I think another one that falls into that category of places that are iconic to the show, but I would never want to hang out in, Patty's Pub.
Yes.
From It's Always Sunny.
Definitely. Yeah, that's another one that, would not be on my list for the reasons that are obvious. It's horrible in every way. But it
and
is.
The people there are awful too.
Yeah, and it does. It encapsulates for me something specifically about dive bars outside of New York because it's so spacious and the area around it is so spacious. We absolutely have dive bars here, although frankly in Manhattan anyway, they are sort of a dying breed because you just it's becoming an oxymoron.
Every time you find one, it's 30 seconds away from being gentrified.
Yeah. But yeah, to have that kind of space, to have them have that much space, and still be sort of coasting by on just, it's just not that expensive to operate it. But yeah, obviously lots and lots of good times at Patty's Bar.
So there's two others that as a child, I was oh man, I can't wait to be a grown-up and hang out there. Or I can't wait to be a teenager and hang out there. Okay. And those are Phil's Bar and Grill.
What's that?
From Murphy Brown.
Okay.
I was a tiny little budding journalist, and I wanted so badly to be with the movers and shakers in Washington, D.C. politics and hang out at Phil's Bar and Grill, where Sam Donaldson at any given moment would just walk in and start chatting with you.
Yeah, no, I thought of that too. I didn't include that because we've watched so few of them. And it didn't feature the bar so much that I just don't have that much of a memory of it. Yeah. But I definitely agree that idea of a bar that is sort of unofficially affiliated with a certain trade or occupation or a certain scene.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you get all the people hanging out there. That's a good one.
So that was one that my little 10-year-old wannabe journalist heart definitely was oh, when I grow up, I'm going to have a place like that where I go to lunch with my coworkers. Yeah, right. And then the other place is the Smash Club.
Yes, I've got that one too.
Which is from Full House. This is Jesse's club in the later years of Full House. And oh my God, I went to a teen club that was, we've talked about this, for country line dancing. Yeah. It was called Neon Moon. When I was in 7th grade, that's when the whole line dancing craze that apparently hit our neck of the woods never hit Jay's neck of the woods.
Yes. No, we did not. We had the Nashville network.
The teen club is totally something I did when I was a teenager and aspired to when I was a young one watching Full House.
Yeah, you're not really speaking my language with the line dancing, but I did put the Smash Club. It's good, clean, I don't know if they serve alcohol there. Maybe
No,
they do. But
maybe on
definitely
not teen
to
nights,
the
yeah.
kids. And this is getting us into the trope of the character opens a business, right? We haven't covered this as a trope yet, but this is a thing that happens. I was reading up on this, and apparently Jesse inherited the Smash Club.
Oh.
And there's a whole storyline about that.
I didn't know that.
And then, of course, when they have the stories with the girls forming a band with their friends, they're going to play at the Smash Club. And Stephanie's potential boyfriend, his band plays at the Smash Club. So that becomes the sort of, the venue for all kinds of stuff to happen. And I remember that as one of the, one of your standard, like, okay, seasons 4 through 7, we're going to need a different overarching story for this deadbeat uncle character. So let's have him open a club. Yeah. So I don't know. I think of all of these bars and clubs, I think the winner is pretty clear. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't think. I'm struggling with this one. I don't think the winner is clear.
I guess maybe it's because I'm indifferent, to hanging out in real life. So I just divert to, Cheers is just, by far the most iconic show. And it also just the bar itself, I think, is just kind of like, it's just the nicest construction.
All right. So I hear what you're saying, but I think that if we were to hang out, and not even if I was to hang out, right? If I was to go somewhere, I think that I would like the Griffin from New Girl better than both McLaren's and Cheers because of the variety of activities that go on there. Like I mentioned briefly, there is a jukebox, there is a dance floor, there is a piano, there is booth, big round deep booth seating, and there's bar areas. So because of the multi faceted what is the word I'm looking for? Because of the variety of experiences that you can have at the Griffin, I think that one might win out of best bar, but I still got to give the honorable mention to Phil's because, man, I would hang out there all the time. Yeah, no, that's all good points. If we want to sort of collectively give it to the Griffin from New Girl, seeing that I'm kind of indifferent to bars anyway, I have no issue with that. All right. I will take it. All right. Let's move on to our restaurants and cafes category. Right. All right. Let me go first. I'm just going to introduce one of these. This is the one where I feel like I've got, a lot of my sort of major contenders for overall best hangout. I have 8 total on my list here. I definitely have a top 4 and a bottom 4. Okay. Yeah, I've got 4 on my list. I'll start with this one. This is a family-owned restaurant in a show that sort of portrays, sort of gives you a picture of this whole town that's kind of got its own idiosyncratic vibe. It's a wharf town, which I've never really experienced. Wharf town? What are we talking about? We're talking about the titular restaurant from Bob's Burgers. Yes. So all of Bob's Burgers takes place in this sort of seaside community. Yes. And of course, the restaurant, Bob's Burgers, is downstairs from their house. Yes. So, it's not a hangout in the standard sense of it's not a bunch of friends that come and hang out. Sure. But what you get there, if at any given time, if you were to walk into Bob's Burgers, you would have the staff, which is the family. So you would have the kids, Jean, Louise, and Tina, serving you and running around with the napkins and whatnot. And Linda, being the waitress and everything. You've got the burger of the day and always of Bob's a funny little, joke, yes. Yeah, custom things. And then you've got all of the characters. You've got Teddy hanging out there, Marshmallow, the sex worker that pops in from time to time, just all of the
crazy fixtures of the town. And so, look, ultimately, I don't think it's one of the most iconic hangouts in TV history, but that was one of my sort of...
but it is a place that you would like to maybe hang out.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that was my sort of quirky entry, because I feel like some of these are a little down the middle. So Bob's Burgers, that's one. That's one.
All right. So... I'm debating here if I'm going to go direct to my top 4 or if I'm going to give you some of my honorable mentions. I think I'm going to go to my top 4, and then maybe we can talk about some honorable mentions later. So I think probably my number 4 out of my top 4 is Central Perk from Friends, right? So as a coffee shop, as a super fun, like New York space, I really like it. So this one in my mind kind of went up against the other coffee shop that is kind of an iconic hangout, which is Cafe Nervosa from Frasier.
Yeah.
So why does this one win over Cafe Nervosa? Because Cafe Nervosa is too busy. There's always a million people wandering in and out of that set and that scene and those scenes. The chairs are rickety and there's it's so cramped. It is what most New York coffee shops are like, even though it's set in Seattle, right? So for that reason, I was like, it's too cramped, it's too crowded. I wouldn't actually want to hang out there. Now, the couch and that whole cushy set that is in Central Perk, that's a kind of coffee shop I would hang out in. I love a coffee shop that has couches and big comfy chairs and you can just chill and there's coffee tables and you can sit in a corner and read. That is favorite hangs.
Yeah. The thing for me, I've got a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about Central Perk, or maybe about Friends in general. It's if you ask me would I want to hang out in Central Perk, sure, I would want to hang out on a cloud with Marilyn Monroe as my bride. It's just the stuff of fantasy. And it's funny you mention how Cafe Nervosa is more realistic for New York, even though it's Seattle. I would buy both of these if they switched. Maybe in Seattle, they could have someplace like Central Perk. Not anywhere in the tri-state area. And it's not
That's not true. You could have Central Perk somewhere else in the tri-state area.
It's not that there aren't coffee shops with couches, because obviously there are.
Yes, but many Starbucks have couches.
But there's something, well, all right, to back up a second, obviously, the sitcoms are not documentaries. This is not meant to be a searing, realistic look at what life as a young person in New York City was like in the 1990s. And I get that. And I know that I'm always thinking way too hard about it when I bring up stuff like this. But Friends, to me, it ages really poorly in the way that it envisions a New York City with almost no people of color, and where there were just all of these socioeconomic realities that don't exist. And chief among them to me is this coffee shop that basically...
Well, chief among them is Monica's apartment.
Yeah, I mean, they explain that with the stupid rent control thing, that wouldn't really work. But Central Perk being this coffee shop that sort of functions as essentially a second living room for this one group of friends that just has all of these extras peppered around the periphery, and these guys get to sit down and have their same exact spot every single time and sprawl out over the whole restaurant. And again, I understand it's because it's a set of a sitcom and it's not real, and I get that. But when you factor in all of these other aspects of Friends and how their privilege basically comes across as a little queasy to me now, that to me really sort of symbolizes it. The fact that they just have this whole place at their disposal.
In the middle of Greenwich Village.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel to me like what a coffee shop is like. Whereas the Frasier one, you're right, you wouldn't necessarily like have a daydream where you like got to hang out. But that feels real to me. You go there with your friend, you get your little high table or you get your little thing in the corner and you have your little conversation and you don't get the whole place to yourself. And so, neither of them were on my list, but Central Perk to me is like, again, like, yes, it's appealing, but in a way that is so untethered from reality that it almost just makes me mad to think about it.
Almost just makes you mad? I don't think it almost just makes you mad. Well, all of that being said, I would like to hang out on a cloud, and I would like to hang out at Central Perk.
Fair enough. All right, so my next one, this is just basically my goodwill for this show, I guess, and sort of what all of these, like the obligatory nature of these sitcom hangouts, especially in the 80s. This is 2 in 1. Because I believe these are 2 businesses that occupied the same space.
Okay.
I think. I'm, of course, talking about the Yesterday Cafe.
Oh, they didn't occupy the same
as
space.
Sid's Pizza Parlor.
At Sid's Pizza Parlor. No. So Sid's Pizza Parlor made my list. It was my number 2 because every time they hung out there, this is from Charles in Charge. Yes. So every time they hung out there, that pizza looked so damn good.
The pizza looks very good. The whole place is like appetizing.
Yes, it's almost like it reminds me a lot of Pizza Hut, like from back in the day. It has the red cups. It has the red checked tablecloths. It is, and the pizza is so damn appetizing. Every time they go, I'm like, oh man, I want to go to Sid's Pizza Parlor. Now, Lillian, the mother, who she rented Sid. So Sid owned the place, and then he decided to retire.
Yes, we should just say here already, this is such standard, like, season 3 or 4 bullshit of these TV shows, where they start running out of ideas and go, oh, wait a minute, the pizza parlor that we have just because it's a pizza parlor, what if we have some story where the mom owns that?
So she takes over to run the business, and she rents out Sid's Pizza Parlor when he decides to retire. So she's renting it from him. And then her rent, or like her lease ends, and she decides not to renew her lease and to go and buy this other place, the Yesterday Cafe.
Right.
The Yesterday Cafe did not make my list. Sorry, Yesterday Cafe. Don't want to hang out at your knockoff Peach Pit, knockoff Arnold's, 50s diner.
That is the thing. It's almost like they got scared of like, oh, gee, we're the only show that has a pizza parlor. Every other sitcom
has a 50s diner.
Yeah. And so, they decided to do that. It's weird. Obviously, both of them serve that function of like everything has to happen at this place that doesn't happen at the house, So all kinds of performances and stuff.
Yes, a million things. There's always some fun stuff going on, which is why what made my number 3. So as I said, Sid's Pizza Parlor in particular is my number 2. Yesterday Cafe, nope, not at all. Okay. But my number 3 that is a throwback diner and also has lots of entertainment, and the whole gang hangs out there all the time, and there's always a floor show or something fun going on, is the Max.
Yeah.
From Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, the Max from Saved by the Bell is obviously on my list. In fact, that was my next one too, so it works out perfectly. Yeah, the biggest and funniest thing about that just is the utility of it, that they use it for absolutely everything.
That's right.
But I will...
Talent Scout coming to town, we're doing a show at the Max.
Pep rallies, local radio broadcasts, every sort of meeting or negotiation.
Yes.
Not to mention just the fact that, like, you go there, to have French fries for study hall, but it's also going to be where you have your big date on Saturday night.
Yes,
everything in between. And, one of the first watch along. The nostalgia type podcasts I ever listened to was April Richardson's Go Bayside podcast. And she would always complain about the fantastic nature of that, oh, you know, I can't believe they have everything at the max. And there's even a part where there's an episode where they explain the school actually owns the max. Like, you know, they somehow legally purchased it. But to me, and again, I'm the one just now complaining about the realism of Central Perk, the max, it never seemed that far-fetched. Like, where I grew up, the school did have these affiliations with local businesses.
Yeah.
And so, you know, granted...
Ours was a pizza parlor, Capona's Pizza, that has now just recently, after the most recent hurricane, they got hit hard, 2 hurricanes in a row, and they're going out of business. 52 years.
That sucks.
So sad.
Yeah, and so some of the things do strain credulity, like just the fact that there would be no other place in the community for them to have like the Miss Bayside pageant or something. But nonetheless, especially like anything to do with the school taking place at the max never seemed that strange to me. Plus, you also have depending on what season you're talking about, season 1, I think, has Max himself. So Max is Ed Alonzo, who is this very famous magician in his own right. Like people who are into magic, you know, Neil Patrick Harris, those guys like a little bit older than us who grew up in wanting to go to the Magic Castle and all that. Like they loved Ed Alonzo. And it's funny how Saved by the Bell would do that the same way they got the Micro Machines guy to be the teacher that talked too fast. It was almost like halfway between a sitcom and just like a variety show. Like, let's get people with crazy talents and they'll be a teacher or a waiter or something.
Yeah.
So you had Max, and then in the later seasons, you had James, who was the actor, who was the waiter. And so
I don't really remember him.
I mean, honestly, I don't know that he was in more than 2 or 3 episodes, but he's in the ones where they're applying to college. And so they would have him play like multiple, they would have like a meeting where Mr. Belding thinks he's meeting Zach's dad, but he's actually meeting James the waiter. And then they switch it up and the guy from the college comes and he thinks he's meeting Mr. Belding, but it's really James. And so they have him be their adult, basically.
I see. All these different situations.
Schemes, exactly. So yeah, and then of course Kelly works there for a while, so it looms so huge. I mean, I think you could probably count on one hand the number of Saved by the Bell episodes that don't include the Max. Definitely the Murder Mansion one. Yeah. And maybe the one where they go to the mall.
And all the ones, like the special ones, all the ones on vacation at the beach.
Yeah, that's true. They have their own sort of like little club place there. Yeah, Max, very strong contender, obviously. Well, I've only got one more, so why don't you do another one? My number 1 is sort of like the real version of what the Max is trying to be.
Oh,
you know?
Okay.
I mean, we talked about it many times, and I'm going to argue it's one of the best TV hangouts and one of the best TV sets of all time, Arnold's from Happy Days.
Wow,
You've
nice.
got, first of all, you know, and you mentioned in your research how you found that they changed the way that they shot it and they actually did kind of simplify it over time.
Yeah.
But at least in those original seasons, you had this location, at least for the exterior, this sprawling.
Yeah, it was like a full-on like drive-in kind of place.
Right. And so it's exemplifying the 50s nostalgia that's going to be the whole show. Like you have so much of that in this location where you've got this gigantic parking lot where the kids park all of their old-timey cars and the waitresses ride around on roller skates and serve the food. So all of that already is just this like tidal wave of nostalgia. And again, we're talking about a real exterior set. So you're seeing real, you know, California or wherever they filmed this. And then inside you've got, of course, the huge iconic, you know, dining space and performance space where they would have Richie and his band band play all the time. And of course, they reappropriated it for the Spike Jones, the Weezer video, the Buddy Holly thing. So you've got all of that. And, so much of the wheelings and dealings and, I need to go ask out the girl, whatever. So much of that happens in that dining space. And then you've got Fonzie's office, quote unquote, the bathroom.
The men's bathroom.
Inside it. And so it's just like, they did, again, you talk about that third space of, they need, the kids need a place to hang out. And, we don't just want it to all be in the house and the school and stuff. Like, they get so much action and just like you could have a whole movie be in that one location and it wouldn't feel cramped because it's so labyrinthine. And
that movie is called American Graffiti.
Yeah. I mean, most of that's actually in the cars outside. But to me, that's a pretty strong contender.
Yeah, and I had that on my list as an honorable mention. So Arnold's / Al's later on when Pat Morita retires or he moved on from the show or whatever, and then they replaced him with another actor, and it became Al's. But yeah, so my number one. And so the thing that the kind of through line here that as my spaces got higher on the list, right? You started out with Central Perk for me, which is like a comfy place, a place I would actually like to hang out, quiet, comfy coffee shop. Then the Max, just because it's so iconic and so many different things going on. Then for me came Sid's Pizza Parlor because that food looks so tasty. And my number one follows in this theme. Every single time the characters on this show go to this place, I want a smoothie.
The groovy smoothie?
The groovy smoothie from iCarly. It is so tasty. Literally, my mouth will water every time the kids go to groovy smoothie. So my number one is groovy smoothie from iCarly. And Tebow, he's like my probably second favorite character on that show. First favorite ancillary character. I love him. He's hilarious.
Yeah, that's a good one. I thought of that too. I love how colorful it is. It's funny. I don't I drink smoothies a lot, but I don't crave them. There's something about it's not like seeing a commercial and you see a steak and it makes your mouth water or something. I'm not going to see a smoothie on TV and say I gotta have a smoothie.
Well, because it's just a cup, but there's you don't ever even see the color of the smoothie, but there's something about it and just the way they talk about it. I'm going to get a mango whatever. I'm going to get a this whatever. Oh yeah, who's going to get the? I'm just yep. And Tebow comes over. He's like, here's your, blimey limey with an extra shot or whatever. Yep, I'm there for it.
Yeah. I've got nothing bad to say about the groovy smoothie.
For a change, poo-pooing on all my others.
Well, look, I'll say, I think, in terms of all of these, come on, you got to give it to Arnold's, right? Just for the sheer, history of it, Arnold's walked so that groovy smoothie could fly,
Well, I don't know that groovy smoothie flew. I don't know if you have to give it to Arnold's. I think if you were going to give it to one, it might be the Max, just because of the, how much, speaking of how much they got out of it. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. See, I would still argue that Happy Days got just as much out of Arnold's. And again, I think they're all they're going back to that stereotype. You wouldn't have the Max if you didn't
now there
have
you go. That's
Arnold's.
the one, Arnold's walked so the Max could fly.
But even then, I would say by the time you get to iCarly, they have to change it up and be more creative with it.
They're not doing the Charles thing of let's get rid of this pizza parlor. Let's go ahead to, our tried and true method here.
But yeah, I think just, not to say that the one that came first has to always be the best, and also not to say that that was the first ever hangout like that. But to me, Arnold's is just so iconic, and just for the reasons I said, the sheer quality of it. The Max, when all is said and done, is a crappy set. Arnold's is an amazing accomplishment,
Well, it's multiple sets, and that's why. Whereas the Max is a pretty great set, know,
But
there's
it's
lots
tiny.
going on there.
It's only like
they,
8
They
tables.
did a good job with the levels, so you could always have things going on and be seen.
Yeah, they had the tiers.
So, a couple honorable mentions that we didn't touch on, and I guess I can concede that Arnold's can be the winner in this category, even though I stand by my groovy smoothie, and I think Sid's Pizza Parlor is way more tasty than Arnold's.
Yeah.
But we didn't mention Monk's Cafe and Rachel's Place from Seinfeld, Monk's Cafe, and from Family Matters, Rachel's Place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Seinfeld one is huge. And, you know, like anybody in New York, I've walked past that restaurant a bunch of times. But I don't know. I think that's just one where for all the reasons that I said about the Max and Arnold's, like with Seinfeld, it's an iconic show and a lot of it took place there. But all it is them sitting there talking, you know, like there's not, because the show itself is so much better in many ways than Saved by the Bell, they don't need to have everything take place in the cafe. Jerry Seinfeld doesn't have to do his comedy routine at Monk's restaurant. So,
That's true.
Yeah.
It can just be a diner, like a regular diner.
It is.
Yeah.
Visually, I find it interesting how like bleak Seinfeld is now
Yes.
when you compare it to the others.
The other thing that I will say that I will go in the plus column for Monk's Cafe from Seinfeld is they don't always sit at the same booth.
That's true.
They sit in like 3 different
they
places.
have a few different ones.
And sometimes they even sit at the counter. And so
That's true of Saved by the Bell. Also,
think
they have a couple, not the
that's
counter.
true.
They
Yeah,
would never go
yeah.
that far, but they have at least two.
booths.
Sometimes the one on the right, sometimes the one on the left.
Exactly. But so, like, I mean, all these other places that we mention, Central Perk and McLaren's and all of this, they even make jokes about, like, you know, there'll be one episode where people are sitting in their spots
Yes.
and they, like, get in a fight with the, like, people who are in their spots. But that doesn't happen on Seinfeld. It's like a regular New York cafe where you get sat where you get where they have available.
That one is,
or you get seated where there's a spot. You know?
it's realistic. And again, we don't
Yeah.
need to judge sitcoms by their realism, but the Seinfeld cafe.
But Jay will when it's his turn.
The Seinfeld cafe experience is like in reality. They go there, they have coffee, they leave.
Right.
That's it. They don't own the whole place. They don't have like community events there.
No, but every now and then they'll talk to the, you know, randos at the next table over, or they'll see someone there.
Yeah, and there are stories that involve the restaurant for sure. Okay, any other honorable mentions or
No,
final thoughts?
That was it. Let's move on to home-based hangs.
Home-based hangs. Why don't you go first this time? Give me one of your home-based, privately owned hangouts. And I'll say for this one, I don't really have a hierarchy here. I just kind of have a few things jotted down. I don't really have as much of a passionate ranking. So
Yeah.
Mine are kind of
so
random.
I have 2 that, and like I have a number 2 and a number 1. Like that's kind of where I am. So my second place is Will's apartment from Will and Grace.
Oh, okay. I thought you were referring to a different Will.
Ooh, which Will do you think I was referring to?
He of West Philadelphia, born and raised.
I see.
Okay, Will and Grace. Now this, as I'm sure we talked about for that episode, I was not a big Will and Grace head. So I think I only saw it the one time we watched it for the show.
So it's at the beginning of the series, it's Will and Grace's apartment. They live together. He is very fastidious and she is an interior designer. So amazing apartment, right? And they both are single working professionals in New York City, so they can afford a nice place.
So
right?
it actually makes sense.
So it actually
All
makes
the things
sense.
that are always the case in the apartments in
Yes.
the city, but this time, okay.
Right. And so they have a really nice place. But then later on in the series, Grace decides that like she's a little too codependent on Will. And then we find out, I guess, that it's technically his apartment. So she moves out and gets an apartment across the hall. And then later on in the series, even further, she ends up moving back in, and then Jack takes over her apartment. So then Jack lives across the hall from them. Karen is the only one who never lives with any of them, and that's because she's super wealthy and has the mans. And so, but yes, so for all intents and purposes, it's Will's apartment, but it's at any point in the show, it's Will and Grace's apartment, it's Will and Jack's apartment, and it's just Will's apartment. But yeah, it's gorgeous. It has a wonderful sort of like, it's not even a Juliet balcony. It's just one of those like narrow balconies. They've got, good views. I think it's on the Upper West Side. It's just, and it's cozy. They have a little living room area, but then they also have kind of a raised den where their television is, and they have a little love seat in front of their television. So that's a nice little nook that I think in anybody else's space would be used as something else, because like the main living space would be where your TV is, but because it's a television show, that's not where the TV is. And then their bedrooms are on either side. Also, the kitchen is kind of like right there in the main living space, and it's a really open kitchen. So they have this like kind of big bar that separates, like a big island that kind of separates the kitchen from the living room. And I think maybe even the sink is in that island, which would never happen in a it would happen in a fancy New York City apartment. But anyway, I really like that space for so many reasons. It's a New York apartment that I would love to live in, number one. It's a proper 2-bedroom, on the Upper West Side. And it's really gorgeous. So there you go. That's my second.
All right, I can kind of match that one. I'll take the one on my list that's most similar to that, which is the sort of living room / workspace from Designing Women.
Ooh, nice.
Because that is pretty much the same thing as what you're talking about, and the opposite. It's in Georgia, I think, instead of New York City. In
a very, historic antebellum home.
Yes, they have a big house that you see the exterior of, the establishing shot all the time. And so it's obviously not cosmopolitan, but it's that thing of they are designing women. And so everything is going to be nice. And so, that show, it's from the mid 80s. It's shot on film at a time when not all of them were. So it's similar to Cheers, where when you're watching it at the time, I certainly was not aware of the difference between TV shows shot on film versus video, but I absolutely was aware some of them look a certain way and some of them look more like a movie. And Designing Women is one of those shows that it's just, it's shot on film, so it's got that nice look to it, and then all of the wood and brick and plants and everything, and then the designing women themselves, all of their clothing and everything, and Annie Potts' hair and the way that the camera captures her auburn
some of
hair.
the things are not about the house.
Well, it's everything in the house. And so, if you're talking about...
So Julia Sugarbaker's house ranks high on your list.
Yeah, if you're talking about, just somebody's home, and in that case, it's a home and a workspace that's just been sort of meticulously designed and captured on film, I'll say, the Designing Women's house, the Sugarbaker estate.
Nice. All right. So my tippy top, if I was going to pick any sitcom home space that I would like to hang out in or live in or have be my place that I get to live here. You know what I mean? This to me is the one. I want to live in the Brady Bunch house.
Oh, I was not expecting that. Okay.
Everything except the AstroTurf. The AstroTurf must go. I will put in real grass. But besides that, that house with those stairs and the sunken living room and the connected bedrooms upstairs with the bathroom in between. I love this house. The outside, the backyard, the little detached garage, yes. Let me live there. Mid-century modern dream home.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look up a picture because honestly, I can't even really react to anything. Like when I picture, obviously, like I have an overall image in my mind of like what the interior of that show looks like.
Well, so all you need to know is that Mike Brady is an architect.
Okay, I'm seeing it now.
He designed this home, and it is fabulous.
This is very, would you call it like mid-century modern?
That's what I just said. It's my mid-century modern dream home. Thanks for listening, Jay. This is the aesthetic that you see in like The Incredibles. Yes.
In their house. Definitely. It's funny how like looking at random pictures on the internet, for me anyway, it actually like it serves it better than the show itself.
Sure, because the show wasn't shot on film.
Yeah, and it just, that old-timey, like, I just think of it as being very, like, orange and brown, but when I look at it, like, it's, actually very colorful, and yes, that is quite a solid choice. Okay, so I don't have any others that are, like, architectural, per se. The first one I've got here, you sort of stole the thunder a little bit with one of your restaurant picks, because I thought this was kind of thinking outside the box. But this requires an important caveat that I would only want to hang out here if I was a child or a teen. I do not want, as a 45-year-old man, to hang out at this place. This is I believe the upstairs home studio
iCarly's bedroom.
iCarly. Well, yes. I was initially going to say iCarly's bedroom, which would be even weirder. And I said, no, let's make it the studio.
No, this was one that the only reason it didn't make my list was because I was like, all right, I have to choose between iCarly spaces, and I'm going to choose Groovy Smoothie
that is
over
why
this
I
one.
didn't consider the smoothie.
But this, you're not wrong. Like, Carly's loft, which serves as her bedroom, their studio, like
sure, it's
the total,
huge
it's
space.
huge. Yeah, it's this loft that's on like the second or third floor of this palatial apartment in Seattle. Yes, and they've got an elevator inside their own apartment.
Yeah.
And so I mean, like this place is huge. Carly, we've established in the past, like Carly's Navy admiral father is very wealthy.
Yeah, she lives with her brother. Her brother is a crazy installation artist, so there's all kinds of wacky stuff.
Basically in a penthouse apartment in Seattle.
Yeah. And so,
it's amazing.
Yeah, the upstairs is where they film their web series. We talked about when we covered iCarly how I loved that concept. I made videos and stuff when I was a kid. I loved the way that show sort of inspires kids to be creative and do things like that. And so, I think even with the caveat, I'm not going to say I want to be in iCarly's bedroom. I'll say the upstairs,
the loft, Carly's loft
studio is my place.
There you go.
But so that's one. I'll run down a few others, kind of lightning round style. The basement from That 70s Show, I was not a huge fan of that show, but just catching it here and there, like that clearly sort of captured that thing of smoking weed with your friends in the basement.
Right. And what's so funny about that is that the reason I didn't put it on my list is because the only reason for me to hang out there would be that there was a point in time where I thought all the people on That 70s Show were super cool. Not so much anymore, but that's okay. But I wouldn't ever actually want to hang out in a super smoky basement. So,
I definitely, not a basement, but that would definitely have typified like some of my college years for sure. A smoky dorm room. I guess that has a certain appeal. I wouldn't mind living in the garage with Alf. I think that would be a good time. Right? I'm remembering that, right? Alf lives in a garage.
I mean, he mostly is out in the garage,
or he's just relegated to the garage when people come over.
Or the kitchen, where he can pop up in that little window and talk, freak the family out because he's trying to talk to them while someone else is just in the bathroom or something. But I think you're right. I think he
has like
does
his own
like
little like spot, right?
place because that's where they spy on him in that first episode, and he's like writing a letter to his family that he's never going to see again.
He crashes in the garage.
Yeah, like crashes in the backyard, but then like kind of lives in the garage.
I wouldn't mind hanging out in the garage with Alf.
All right. Well, so then along those same lines, what about the pool house at the Banks mansion?
That was literally the next thing I was going to say.
Okay.
That in general, I feel like the real hangout spot in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is just their living room. That's one of those shows that just kind of takes place in the house. That's 80% of the show.
Yeah, a lot of the lists out there were talking about like the Peacock something, which is that bookshop where they work. I'm like, I don't really feel like that was a hangout for Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
I don't consider that super iconic, nor do I consider this, this little pool house that they had, but it was cool. Like the episode that we covered on our very first podcast ever, where Carlton's losing his virginity, that was one of those later episodes where they're living in the
pool house. Yeah.
And they're playing poker with their friends and stuff. And like that would be a fun place to live. Again, like it's not super iconic. I feel like they were only there for 1 or 2 seasons. And that's such a standard TV sitcom thing to do. Filthy rich family, but we're not going to get a nice place for the college age kid. We're going to have them live in the pool house so that everyone
or the apartment over the garage.
So and then I'll say, just in terms of like a cool place to hang out with cool people, the loft in New Girl. Right, especially the any night that True American is playing, right? I think for me that was maybe one of the reasons why I didn't consider the bar from New Girl, was because I was more focused on, like, for me the real fun of that show is just
hanging out at the loft. Yeah.
And again, as someone from New York, not having a ton of experience with the LA market, I feel like they've got a little more space there. I'm sure it's still expensive as hell, but I could buy into, I wasn't as like incredulous when they have all of that space to themselves.
Right. Well, especially considering the bathroom is like totally dinky and a mess.
And it is the 4 of them sharing it.
Sharing the one space.
And then the only other thing I've got here, kind of along the same lines of the iCarly set, and I will issue the same disclaimer, Clarissa's room.
I had Clarissa's room in my mind. I was like, as a kid, that was the bedroom I wanted. She had the coolest bedroom, for sure.
The computer where every time she has a scheme, she can do a weird simulation video game
bay
thing.
Window. Like that always, I always wanted like a window nook where I could like have a window seat. My aunt's bedroom at my grandparents' farm, she had a window seat in that bedroom. And it was like every time I would go visit my grandparents, that was my favorite place. I would take my books and I would just go sit in my Aunt Beth's window seat and just read. I loved that place.
And of course, your friends can come in through the window. It's like Sam or Vinny Del Pino. So those are all of mine. Again, I don't have like a super passionate ranking or anything. I don't know. Again, if we have the sort of magic ability to cast ourselves as any age, I think the iCarly apartment takes it for me.
Yeah. I'm going hard on the Brady Bunch house. Like, to me, that it doesn't matter the age. Like, that place is cool. There's something for everyone. I think Brady Bunch house wins this one.
All right. That leaves just our sort of miscellaneous.
And I am so excited to hear what you have in this category, because I have one, sort of 2, but really just one. And you were teasing me so much at dinner. You were like, I've got all these outside of the box ideas. I'm like, I can't wait to hear what these are.
Again, we were originally just going to do a simple top 5. And so I really wanted to make it my business to not just be the Max, the diner, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I'll give you one right out the gate. So this is a business, but it's not an eatery of any kind. Now, this was something that we talked about in one of our more divisive and polarizing segments.
Oh, we have divisive and polarizing segments?
Yeah, well, we happen to have a guest on this episode that really did not like this show.
This has got to be Big Bang.
Yes. So I'm talking about the comic book shop from Big Bang Theory.
Okay.
Now, look, I'm on record as being, going into this podcast, being an official Big Bang Theory hater, Chuck Lorre despiser, and actually being kind of pleasantly surprised by the Big Bang Theory episodes we've watched. I don't really have a huge consistent opinion one way or the other, but the idea of a comic book shop as a hangout is a huge thing for me.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, in the show, it's just more of a place they visit. It's not a hangout.
Well, I don't know. Here's the thing. Again, I'm not the biggest Big Bang Theory fan, but I've seen a handful of them over the years, and I looked into it a little bit, and I think there's a lot overall in the series. I get that this is not like the Max. They don't go here all the time.
And they don't hang out there.
But there are
the places they hang out are their apartment.
Yeah. No,
and
I've seen
then
it.
every now and then they go to the Cheesecake Factory.
Yes.
And then the other place that we see them is at their cafeteria at work.
Yes. No, the show is 80% their apartment and the hallway, like a domestic sitcom. But nonetheless, I really like this location, and it's used in all kinds of ways over the course of the series. They have all kinds of different events and stuff there. And in comparison to like the comic book shop from The Simpsons, which is more of a sort of point of satire where they're sort of making fun of a comic book shop and the guy that would run it, the Big Bang Theory, like we talked about at length in that episode, very debatable what the stance of that show is on its characters, and is it really embracing nerddom or making fun of it, and all that stuff. But nonetheless, I'll say that the portrayal of that comic book shop, when I see those scenes in that show, the same way you're talking about some of these other places where like, oh, the food looks good, or I like the architecture or whatever. Like, I want to go there.
You want to go to that comic book shop.
Yeah,
okay,
it looks like a fun place to be.
Yeah.
So
you would enjoy browsing the shelves or the bins or whatever they have there.
Exactly. So the Comic Center of Pasadena is what it's officially called.
Oh, nice.
That's on my list.
I got to write that on the list. The Comic Center of Pasadena. All right. So I only have one. So I want to hear another one of yours before I give you mine.
Okay. The other one of mine is basically everything that we said about Cheers, the fact that show gets so much mileage and value out of having the whole set be alive with people.
Yeah.
Let's take that same creative team, the Charles brothers and James Burrows, just turn back the clock a decade or so.
Okay.
You're talking about a workplace
situation. You're talking about Taxi.
Yeah, the garage in Taxi.
Nice.
Just this totally blue collar, sort of relatively big, expansive set where there's always lots of people milling around. You've got all of this machinery. You've got little Danny DeVito up high in his little booth there. Mm-hmm. So there's just like always stuff happening. And so
there's a payphone on the wall. There's a nickel coffee machine over on the side of the other side.
Yeah. So it's like, again, I feel like this really was one of that team's big contributions to sitcoms. You see it living on now in The Office and things, where it's like and
in Cafe Nervosa, being as busy as it was.
When you're looking at a scene between Judd Hirsch and Mary Lou Henner talking about, oh, I got a big date tonight or whatever, like subconsciously, you're soaking in all this other stuff.
Yeah, you got Andy Kaufman in the background tinkering under the hood of a taxi.
Yeah, exactly. And just all of this stuff for your eyes to kind of absorb. And it just makes everything feel more alive.
Yeah.
And not just like, a little set where they gave, pointed a few lights at people and stuck a microphone on them and said, here, say these lines,
Yeah.
And so, that's a big one for me.
Nice. All right. Okay. So I'll jump in. My place that I would like to hang out it's at a school, and it is everyone's favorite community college. I would like to hang out in the Greendale study room
Yeah.
And see all the crazy dean hijinks and the study group being ridiculous and having everything be them being the center of the universe. I think that the study room at Greendale Community College is where I would like to hang out.
Yeah, I consider
other space.
I considered that too. I think that's a good one. And that's a fun example of a show like that. We've talked all the time about how Dan Harmon and Community have this whole postmodern thing, and they're sort of looking back on all these other sitcoms. And so it is, similar to what I said about the Groovy Smoothie, just sort of going like, okay, like all we really need is just a bunch of people in a room together. It doesn't really matter what it is.
Yes.
And so like, what about a study group?
Right. And you want to talk about a living environment like this, not so much with the people in the background, although they do have that, right? They have people like there's the episode where they say Beetlejuice multiple times throughout the episode, and every single time, like the third time they say Beetlejuice in the episode, a guy dressed as Beetlejuice walks by on the outside of the study room in the background. I mean, there's all sorts of like fun little things going on, but when we're talking about a living environment, there is a whiteboard on one side of the study room and a chalkboard on the other side of the study room. And there's always messages on there relating to something that's going on, either in like the meta world of Community, like the characters or Dan Harmon being like 6 seasons in a movie talking to the audience, or it's like announcements for whatever's about to come up. So like maybe there's going to be a school dance, but we don't know it yet. But guess what? There's something written on the board behind you. So if you pause the show for, that second when Annie is talking and it's in a wide shot, you can read the board behind you and know what's going on. Sometimes it's talking about that episode. Sometimes it's talking about 2 episodes away because they didn't change the board, but they're filming this scene. Anyway, I love, love, love the Greendale study room.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. I think the only drawback for me is that so much of it is them seated. And so it doesn't like, it's not like, all these different things to do. It's all like sitting down. No, but that's also the
basement in that 70s show.
Well, and that's why, obviously, again, it's an apples to oranges thing. Cheers has all this stuff going on because you're spending the whole show there.
Right.
With Community, it's like, we're seated at this study group because that's going to set up the story, and then we're going to go off and we have the production value to do all this other stuff.
But what's so great is that it kind of always at least 3 scenes in almost every Community, not all of them, but at least 3 scenes in most Community episodes are in that study room. You get the ones here and there where they're like at Pierce's mansion or, whatever. They're having they get trapped in like the Kentucky Fried Chicken simulator in the parking lot. They've got all sorts of things, but they always anchor it back there.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting choice because my final nomination for the sitcom Hangouts is also a location in a school.
Ooh.
And it's not just a location.
Oh, boy.
A specific time of day.
A specific time of day. Is this when Mr. Moore enters the class and head of the class?
Before he enters.
Okay.
It is Mr. Moore's classroom at Millard Fillmore High School prior to 8 a.m. or so in Head of the Class. Head of the Class always begins every episode with a little title. Well, first of all, the theme sequence for Head of the Class, there's never a cold open. It's always Mr. Moore on his way to the school and his kind of like the Simpsons coming home from work and stuff. His route is fraught with all these issues. And so
sometimes he has to jump on the back of a turnip truck, which is real weird for New York.
It's the same thing every single time. He's always running late. And so it's sort of supposed to set up like, this is him making his way to the morning. And so the structure of the show is that it always begins on like a Monday morning or something. And it always says, like Monday, 7:14 a.m. or something on the bottom of the screen. And so it's always the kids milling around in the classroom before he gets there. And that just takes me back to, that's what I did in high school. I lived close enough to the school so that we could walk there. And so my friends and I would walk to school and get there like a full 20, 30 minutes before the school buses got there. And so our hangout was the gym. We wouldn't go to a classroom, but that thing of just like kind of being at school before it starts, before the teacher comes and makes everybody sit down and stuff. Very nostalgic.
I am always fascinated by that because, I work at a school. So when I come in, I get there, I get there about 45 minutes before the kids have to be there, kind of generally, right? So like, school starts around 8:30, 8:20 is when the kids start kind of coming in. I'm usually there no later than 7:45. Like that's kind of when I get to work. And it baffles me at these kids that are literally hanging out in the cafe downstairs before school, like an hour before they have to be there. I'm like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would do my homework at that time. You
were not a nighttime homework kid?
No, I mean, I was to an extent, but this is something about my personality that has changed drastically since this time. But as a teenager, I was very much a leave it to the last minute. If this homework is going to take me about 10 minutes, I'll start it 10 minutes before it absolutely needs to be done. And so it just, my parents didn't bug me about that stuff. So I would just get to school early and sit down, whip out the Trapper Keeper or whatever, and just do my homework then and there.
Trapper Keeper, dating yourself.
Yeah. And so that was one aspect to it, but it also just, there's something, I would get there early before school. And then because of debate, I would be at the school way into the evening.
Yeah.
And there's something about a school or a place of business when it's like mostly deserted. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed to this day, I have this thing where I don't like overhead lights being on. I would much rather have just the sunlight come in through the window, or if necessary, a few lights on.
Like a table lamp or whatever.
Yeah. And there's something in the back of my mind that goes back to school of like the overhead lights come on and that means the teacher's here and it's proper school. And then you turn off the overhead lights and you just have like the sunlight coming in, and that's more like just hanging out and like that more sort of peaceful, free time.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I always was drawn to that idea of like being in the place that you're supposed to be, your place of work or your place of school, but having the free time there and being able to just kind of relax.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Mr. Moore showed up and they all like him. And so it's fine. It's not like you're dreading when the teacher finally gets there. But I always liked seeing that they're all kind of in disarray and this one's talking to that one. And then Mr. Moore comes in and, oh, hi. And then they kind of make their way to their seats. And so I find that a very cozy, appealing atmosphere. So
nice.
Yes, I would love to have been Jawar Halal or any one of the kids in Mr. Moore's
hanging
class.
out before the teacher gets to school.
Yeah.
Nice. So I don't know. From our other category, our nominees are the Comic Center of Pasadena, the Garage from Taxi, the Greendale Study Room, or Mr. Moore's classroom, specifically before 8 a.m.
Yeah. I mean, look, again, there's no way to like objectively measure these things. To me, I mean, and yeah, I honestly don't even know what my favorite would be because they're all so different.
Like random. Okay, so here's what I'll say. What if we say, since we don't have a top one from the other category, but we do have two homes that we thought were the top, what if we make our final four the Griffin from New Girl, from our bars and clubs category, Arnold's from our diners and cafes category, and the Brady Bunch house, and iCarly's loft.
Okay, well, look, is there any way, I mean, I don't know how to approach it, process of elimination, or just like, we just say at the same time the one that we think is the
let's
best?
battle them out. Let's do the Griffin versus the Brady Bunch house. Which one would you rather hang out in?
All right, so we've got a bar in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Or a house in...
Probably also Los Angeles.
Also Los Angeles. Yeah, I mean, again, it's a, martinis to couches comparison. I guess the bar in New Girl.
Really? I would rather hang out at the Brady Bunch house.
Yeah, well, and given everything I said about not drinking and everything, yeah, I guess that's easy. Sure, I'll say the Brady Bunch house.
Okay, so Brady Bunch house wins from those two. And then the other two, we've got Arnold's versus iCarly's loft.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's no contest. Arnold's is, again, it's just sort of unimpeachable. I mean, there's nothing bad about iCarly, but for one thing, I could legally go to Arnold's anytime.
Again, this would be you live in iCarly's loft without the child there.
Can't be too careful. Yeah, again, it's hard to compare a place of residence to like somewhere that you go.
Well, I would rather hang out in iCarly's loft because I don't think that I would have fun at Arnold's. I think that Arnold's would be annoying.
Yeah.
I think that the food would kind of be sort of diner food that I don't like. And I think that it would be fun to sort of see the Fonz, but like really the rest of it would be kind of meh.
Yeah. I mean, again, like Arnold's ranks higher to me for all the reasons I already said, that it's such an amazing set and everything. But iCarly's has all of the, all the creativity and everything. So yeah, I mean, I'm fine with either of them.
So maybe we went about this ending the wrong way. Maybe we should put our two actual third spaces up against each other. So our top third spaces were the Griffin and Arnold's. And I think between those two, Arnold's wins.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we are thinking, what's the best third space? Right? That was the whole point of this show. And obviously there's sometimes you don't have a third space. You just hang out at home, and we considered those. But truthfully, the whole point of the show is best hangout. So best third space, it's got to be Arnold's.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, again, maybe we just sort of like the tournament in Harry Potter kind of acknowledge like just the best of all of these, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like we said, like at the end of the day, if you're looking for a bar, it's the Griffin. Arnold's is the best of the
diners
restaurants
and cafes
and stuff.
Honorable mention though for Sid's Pizza Parlor, because that pizza looks so good.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say anything against anybody from Charles and Chard. And then, what were our top of the homes?
Of the homes, we had Brady Bunch and iCarly. Like we couldn't decide between the two. If we had to fight it out between the two, that's a hard one for me because both seem great. Like I would be happy living in either space. Yeah. And they're just like, they're different. They're separated by like 40 years. So it's just like, but it's not just that. They are what the thing that aligns them is that you have to have a shit ton of money to live in either. Well, what makes them most different, though, is with one, you're living with 2 parents, a maid, and 5 siblings. And another one, you've got the whole place to yourself and the one wacky brother. So. Who I would definitely be getting busy with. So I'm choosing iCarly's Loft. All right. Did you just... My Spencer crush? Because, I mean, in this scenario, you are Carly. No, I'm not. Why do you keep saying that we have to be these characters? I'm looking at it like me, Amy Morris, going to live in this place. That's the thing. If I look at it like that, then it's not, because then I'm hanging out with children. No, I'm not hanging out with children. I'm living in this place as my place. It's mine. Just mine. Nobody else. Well, but Spencer... That's your construct, not my construct. But you said you would want to sleep with Spencer. In your construct, not in my construct. And then finally, I think the one thing to me that's clearest of all is Mr. Moore's classroom before 8 a.m. being the best of the miscellaneous not at spaces. All. You're so ridiculous. Oh my goodness. No. Mr. Moore's classroom before 8 a.m. Let's just sit here and sit at a school. I'm at a school every day. I would not like to be at a school for no reason. Yeah. Okay, so whether you are like me and you just want to be in these spaces as yourself, or you're like Jay and you want to become the characters and go be in those spaces, these are the definitive third spaces or best hangouts. Bars and clubs, the Griffin from New Girl. Diners and cafes, Arnold's from Happy Days, the homes that we want to hang out in the most, Brady Bunch House and the iCarly Loft. And then we'll give an honorable mention to Jay's weird fantasy of being in Mr. Moore's classroom for the 10 minutes before the bell rings.
Right on. Yeah, I stand by all of my convictions. So much for the sitcom Hangouts. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, we are getting in shape, Jay. This episode is all about going on a diet. We're going to watch The Bob Newhart Show, Season 2, Episode 11, The Fit, The Fat, and The 41. Gimme a Break, Season 1, Episode 5, Do or Diet. My Sister Sam, Season 1, Episode 8, Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. And New Adventures of Old Christine, Season 4, Episode 20, He Ain't Heavy.
Yep, next week is diet. Until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.